Should I do a little intro like you did we're in Duncan Student Center. Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Stefania here with Father Pete McCormick. We are in the Duncan Student Center in the NDtv studio, and we're just going to have an interview about Father Pete himself, his faith, and just things that are going on with the church right now and Notre Dame in general. So, hello Father Pete.
Hey Danielle.
So excited and happy to have you here. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me. You kidding me?
Yeah, of course. So my first question for you is, what initially brought you to the priesthood? Like, when did you decide you wanted to be a priest?
Yep.
Did you feel called in any way?
So my sophomore year in high school, I started thinking about it, but it wasn't until after I finished college that I really took it seriously in terms of looking at seminaries and so on and so forth. And in fact, I was so undecided about it, I kept changing majors in college to the point that I earned myself a fifth year in college because I didn't have enough credits. Yeah, I mean, that's a positive way of looking at it. My parents didn't see it so positively at the time.
Yeah.
At the end of my fifth year, I realized that this really was the call that I was going to pursue.
Yeah.
So I applied to Moreau Seminary with the Congregation of Holy Cross, and from there, the rest, as they say, is history. I was ordained in 2007, and then have been on campus ever since then.
So going to Moreau brought you to Notre Dame.
Exactly. So the name of the seminary is Moreau Seminary, and so I entered there. That's where you enter and do initial formation and all of your preparatory work. And then you're ordained a priest. And at the time you're ordained, you're assigned to a particular ministry. In my case, I was assigned to be an assistant rector in Dillon Hall. I went from being an AR in Dillon for a year, and then I became the rector of Keogh. And then I went back and did some studies, did an MBA, and then now live in residence in Stanford Hall, and then work in campus ministry.
Okay, awesome. So what would you say is the most rewarding part of being a priest at a place like Notre Dame?
It's simple. It's the students. I love getting to know the students. I love student stories. I love hearing where they're from, what their background is, what their passions are. To me, that is the most rewarding thing. And then if I could continue, in addition, it's following where they go and what they do, right? I mean, this weekend, when we play Florida State, there's all types of students who are coming back. So I get to hear about their careers. I get to hear about their families and their kids, and I've done some of my former RA's weddings and baptized some of their kids. And so like you see this privileged relationship that I have the opportunity of being a part of simply because I'm a priest at Notre Dame. And it's what I love and cherish the most.
Yeah, I feel like as a priest, you're probably like a guiding figure for a lot of people, and especially students. We're at such an impressionable age between you come in as a teenager and you're in between like an older adolescence and then into adulthood when we leave. Yeah. So this is like a really influential time of our lives.
That's right.
Where everything is kind of happening. So you have a lot of power you have to kind of use wisely.
That's exactly right.
With that, I feel like right now in the church, it's kind of a trying time. It's difficult to talk about.
That's right.
But so then, talking about the students and how you are kind of a guide for them, have you felt a stronger responsibility right now of all times? And have you noticed a difference in your job and how you kind of go about it and how people treat you?
That's right. So when we think about the clergy abuse crisis that's occurred in the church, this iteration, it's important to point out that when I was in the seminary, beginning in 2000 and 2002, there was another crisis that broke, and it looked and felt a lot like this. And so I must admit that this second time around for me, there was more a feeling of what happened. Why didn't we take care of this problem back in 2002? And what has become clear as things have unfolded is that while there was certainly a certain degree of transparency that occurred, it wasn't to the fullest extent. And that there's continued need to be able to be as transparent as possible when it comes to these occurrences. It's never going to be acceptable to have an individual who serves as a predator, especially of children. And to make sure that those individuals are held accountable for their deeds and their misdeeds is absolutely essential. And so how this has impacted me is just like anyone else. You know, at first I was angry, very angry. And then I moved to a sense of I need to do something because I can't just sit here in my own anger. I need to do something with it. So in campus ministry, I realized, okay, I can't change the church, but I do have, as you said earlier, I have power and authority in some ways, and I need to make sure I'm using it positively. So we arranged in campus ministry a listening session. I myself wrote an observer viewpoint. I asked all of my fellow Holy Cross priests to preach on it on a particular weekend so that we were naming these types of things. More recently, I've been appointed to a task force that will conduct listening sessions all around campus. In fact, there's a student listening session tomorrow night at 7 o'clock,
Okay.
7 o'clock in Corbett. But to be able to provide outlets for people, because to me, the only way through this, one, is honesty and integrity, and second is to empower the people of God to really lay claim to this church that we all love. I mean, I don't claim to be perfect, and I don't claim to be sinless. I don't think any single person does that when they enter a church. And in fact, sometimes we realize our own need for conversion. But yet, at the same time, if these good-willed people who seek after God are no longer there, then the church is lesser. And so for me, my greatest desire is to continue to provide an invitation and to do so humbly, not out of pretense like you have to do it.
Yeah.
But it's more a matter of, man, it would be awesome to have you with me in this.
Yeah, I remember like the weekend that it broke.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends live in BP. I
Yeah.
lived in Lewis, but a lot
Yeah.
of them lived in BP. And you do BP Mass a lot.
Yep.
I went to BP Mass with them, and you spoke about it. Like your homily, that's what it was about.
Yep.
And I really was surprised. I thought it would maybe be avoided. Like
Yep.
we'd talk about something happy
That's right.
because it's a difficult.
That's right.
It's a really difficult topic
That's
to
right.
discuss. And all of us looked at each other after the homily, and we just went like, "Wow, like that was important," especially because I guess when these things happen, we're so used to them getting brushed over.
That's
But
right.
you were like, "No, we have to talk about this." And
That's right.
I just like, how did you decide to like address it? Like you kind of spoke about it, but to say like, I need to address this right away, like that's a
Yep.
huge decision.
Yep.
So can you just like talk about it, because we're so impressionable and young.
That's
and
absolutely
everything.
right. And I say this in all honesty, Danielle, I think that it's an important lesson that I learned the first time around.
Yeah.
When I was in the seminary, I watched and I couldn't understand why this massive conversation was going on in the Boston Globe and the New York Times and all the major papers. But seemingly I go to the churches and it was as if it wasn't occurring.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, when I get to a situation where I'm faced with dealing and grappling with a tough situation, I would rather it be said that I dealt with it as opposed to just pretended as if it wasn't going on. Because it is hard, and there's no easy entry points. And you don't know how people are going to react, especially in that phase of it, because people were just on the front edge of anger and misunderstanding about what all was going on. But I think all the while, it's important to be able to name and to provide language for how we can begin to grieve what has occurred and how we can begin to even think about going forward.
Yeah.
I spoke about it intentionally, knowing that it was important to name it. And you're absolutely right. It was at the very beginning of the year. This is the time in which everything's light and fun and exciting.
We're
And I
all
thought to
coming
myself,
together.
oh man, I'm going to be a total
Debbie Downer.
Debbie Downer when it comes to preaching about something so heavy right out of the gate.
Yeah, but you had to, and I think you made the right, strong choice. And the problem is, I think when these sort of things happen, people turn away from the church,
Yeah.
but not so much that, and then they decide to just turn away from God completely, which
That's exactly
is
right.
a total shame. And so I actually sent out a form. I said, I'm doing an interview with Father Pete.
Yep.
If you have any questions, fill it
Great.
out. And someone actually asked, what would you say to students who are maybe having like a crisis with their faith right now and
Yep.
don't know how to carry on?
That's right.
What's your advice for them?
Oh, that's a great question, and I appreciate it. The crisis, in the midst of that, it's important to reach out to people that you respect and to have the conversation. I think sometimes in my workings with students all these years that students don't want to offend, especially people in positions of authority. And of course, outright offense is never a good thing, but to have a respectful conversation about an important topic is something that we should be able to do as a university. And so
Yeah.
what I would say to anyone who's on the margin and nervous about what this looks like, reach out to me. Reach out to someone that they trust, that they feel at minimum can give a nuanced perspective about all that's happening in the church. And so that they can begin to form an opinion and realize like, oh, maybe how I'm feeling isn't exactly, I'm not exactly alone in all this. And I think all too often when we face these crisis moments, we think, there's no one that I can go to, and it's really isolating, to the point that, well, then why should I even try? Why should I even care? But there's a lot of people that genuinely care about this.
Yeah.
Because what's occurred from these individuals was just absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
No two ways about it. And I'm not going to stand and let people who committed heinous things in the church that I love to just win the day. I just refuse to allow that to happen.
Yeah. So you're open to all students who want to come talk
Absolutely.
to you about this? Like,
my office is 115 Coleman Morris. I have windows all around it. Or you can email me at McCormick.23@ND.edu. I'm talking to you. Email me.
So with that, like with people having doubts and with their faith in anything, have you ever heard anything from like a saint or a prominent figure in the church, or just someone who you look up to yourself that in these trying times kind of keeps you grounded and really going along, even if it's like a Bible verse? Is there anything that really speaks to you? Like sometimes for me, I have like a little card with the peace prayer of St. Francis, and I love that. It just kind of keeps me going. And then I think it was also St. Francis, I could be wrong, that said like preach the gospel always, when necessary use words.
That's right.
I went to a Franciscan high school, if you couldn't tell.
Your teachers are so proud right now.
Yeah. But just like one of those things that kind of motivates you, like a little mantra or prayer or something.
That's right. You know, one of my favorites is from a saint by the name of Saint Irenaeus. He was a 2nd century saint, and his line was, "The glory of God is a human being fully alive."
Okay.
And I love that because ultimately, at its best, the church hopes that every person has an encounter with God and that they can live their lives in a manner that is full of life. And so that to me that's what I work towards. Even when the church is bruised and I encounter people who are struggling, my objective is always, how can I help you think about what it would mean to live a life that is full and complete and joyful? And that means, frankly, having hard conversations from time to time and being willing to do so.
Yeah, of course. I like that. That's a good quote. So, and then just, what would you say to students, maybe not at Notre Dame or just anywhere, who want to live rewarding, full lives?
Yeah.
Even like, or young Catholics who just really want to live in the image of God, or just, I feel like having a foundation of faith and spirituality is kind of, it enriches you. That's just my personal opinion, because I'm a Catholic. But but what would you say, like, if you were in our spots, what would you want to hear?
Yeah, something that I've struggled with my whole life is I've always felt that I needed to be something else. I've always felt that somehow I myself wasn't enough, that if only I could get this or get that. But what I realized when I got these markers of success, that I still didn't feel all that much different, that I sought to attain these external things to me that at the end of the day are good. They look great on a wall or on a bookshelf or whatever. But what I've realized more after having gone through this several times is that ultimately it's as Thomas Merton once said, for me to be a saint is for me to be who I already am. That the greatest journey we go on is the one of discovery of ourselves, of coming to understand who God has created us to be, wonderfully made, and to be able to courageously share that with the world, I think is the most freeing, because we know ourselves best.
Yeah.
We can genuinely share that, and that requires a ton of vulnerability. It requires of us to offer something that is so core to who we are and that someone could potentially reject. But at the same time, I can't be anything that I'm not. And so I would rather do my very best sharing that than trying to have some trumped up version of who I hope people think Pete McCormick would be kind of appeasing to.
Well, especially now with social media and everything, there's so much pressure to create an image of yourself that may not be yourself. Like Instagram is like the highlights of your life and everything. And people look at it and they just think that like someone's so happy and maybe they're not. I think that is really, really important and great advice.
Thanks.
So thank you so much. And then my final question that somebody submitted, this was not my own.
Great.
was, how are you so good at riding your bike without using the handlebars?
I would say it's the benefits of a misspent youth.
Misspent youth.
I would say that, you know, there are all these books and maybe even a text from within the Bible that I should know better, but I spent my time bombing around my neighborhood with.
Well, yeah, you didn't know you wanted to be a priest until way later, so that's fine. But I mean, I've seen you just whizzing around sometimes, and I'm clumsy, so it's like a lot of, like, it takes a lot of mental energy for me to even ride a bike with the handlebars. And if I go to wave at somebody, I like think I'm gonna fall off. And I've seen you with like your books, and you're just like, woo.
Well, I'll tell you what, I saw a young lady, I don't know where you are, but I was impressed. She was on her bike, no hands, looking down, texting.
No.
Whole new level.
That's dangerous. That's like texting and driving. That's bad.
It was, I just stopped and said, respect.
That's respect, but that's also scary. Wow. All right, thank you so much, Father Pete.
You're welcome.
These are the end of my questions and everything, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's been
Appreciate
great
the
having
invitation.
you. Yeah,
Thanks
of course.
a lot.